Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in internet shitlords. And today I want to address some rumors that have been going around on OSR YouTube regarding Wizards of the Coast and the possibilities of what they might be doing now with D&D. But first of all, here you got the Last Vikings, which is my latest campaign setting at the moment. And it's a campaign setting that you can use with any OSR game, but it's set up to work with Baptism of Fire, Lion and Dragon especially, obviously, but you can use it with anything else where you're playing Yom's Vikings, the last true raiders of the Viking world before that era came to an end. And it's set at the same time period as Baptism of Fire. So if you have Baptism of Fire, you can use it directly as a source book for Baptism of Fire as well. And of course over here is Lion and Dragon, the first of my full-blown RPGs, and World of the Last Sun, which is my gonzo setting, and it's full of absolutely great setting stuff that is, it's not like a big world guide like the Forgotten Realms handbook or something. It's a collection of different locations in the World of the Last Sun with each of which have a kind of different style, and so you can like take parts of it and forget the rest. You can add them into sections of your own world. All of them are very weird and wonderful. And if you want an idea of what the World of the Last Sun is like, I guess you could check out Bill the Elf's YouTube channel, where he has audio recordings of every one of my sessions over the last several years of the Last Sun campaign, and it is a barrel of laughs. So there you go. So today I wanted to bring up something that I've heard in a couple of different channels. First off, Eric Tenkar from Tenkar's Tavern, who is a guy that is, he's very well respected in the OSR circles. He's often got very interesting things to say about what's going on in the OSR or in the hobby or with D&D or things like that. But he did a video recently that I thought was crazily optimistic on his part. Let's put it that way. So that's number one. And the thing that he had suggested is he had heard rumors that Luke Gygax, one of the sons of Gary Gygax, has been brought into Wizards of the Coast in some kind of a consulting fashion for a project of theirs. And from that, the speculation jumped to the idea that Wizards of the Coast is now just going to go back to AD&D First Edition, and that they're going to, it's going to be like the glory days of the 80s again or something like that. And, I'm sorry, but I roll to disbelieve, let's put it that way, in a very, very extreme. I roll with a +10 bonus to disbelieve, okay? And then the second thing is there's another video, I forget exactly where it was. It was one of the, it wasn't really an OSR channel, it was just one of the kind of D&D influencer channels of, kind of the ones that used to be 5e D&D focused, right? And that channel was saying that there was a rumor that Wizards of the Coast is going to start designing a 6th edition of the game. Now that speculation, I have no confirmation of it at the moment, right? Maybe there are still a few people who could be in the know that might let me know in private, because there are people that are still doing that from time to time. Even though, most of the people I knew who had that level of contact with Wizards of the Coast are no longer in contact with Wizards of the Coast. But, that at least could be more believable, right? Because Wizards of the Coast has been through this kind of disaster before, though not as bad as the disaster that 5.5 has been. Okay? Chris Miller pointed out, Chris Miller is the publisher of Last Vikings and Baptism of Fire and Sword and Caravan. And, when Wizards of the Coast put out 5.5 edition, they were talking about how, it was the fastest selling product or whatever. And which it was like a very kind of misdirection, right? Because what is fastest selling, right? That doesn't mean best selling or biggest selling or anything like that. The book trades, we know from the information that we have there, indicates that they have sold very badly. But also, Chris Miller pointed out that at the time that they were saying this, right, the Amazon rankings of like the D&D books were sometimes below the Amazon rankings of Baptism of Fire, right? And so that's really bad for them, right? It's good for me, right? Baptism of Fire sold very well, but for them to be below me is, even for a short time, or whatever, is just apocalyptic for them, right? Like, the money I make from Baptism of Fire is really great for a guy who's basically a one-man operation, right? Two men if you count, Mad Scribe, right? We have, we each have a share of the profits, but we both come out pretty good, not bad at all, right? For me, it's a good living. But for a multi-billion-dollar corporation, it would be a catastrophe beyond all bounds, So it's this makes it pretty obvious, right, that 5.5 edition is just dead in the water. And if that wasn't enough, you look at those former 5e influencers. None of them are talking about 5.5, right? 5.5 is dead to them, and that's the biggest evidence, right? Because if it was really hot right now, if it was doing really well, they would all be on the bandwagon, and they are not. Okay. Now, many years ago, Wizards of the Coast came out with 4th edition. They did this massive ad campaign about how 3rd edition absolutely sucked, which was a really bad idea for them because, of course, there were a ton of people who really liked 3rd edition, but they said, no, this game is terrible. Our new version is going to be way better, and nobody liked it, right? Well, not nobody, not like 5.5, right? But literally, they lost 2/3 of their customer base. They were left with about 1/3 of what they had in 3rd edition, which is still way better, apparently, than the collapse that has happened from 5 to 5.5, right? Now, I would be surprised if they had 10%. It's probably in the single digits that ended up buying 5.5. And they're not, most of those probably aren't going to be consistently purchasing new products after that, if indeed there are going to be any more new products, So the last time with 4th edition, they made this mistake that they thought they could fix it, right? And they worked really hard at trying to make 4E a thing, and it was never going to work, right? The system was terrible. It didn't feel like D&D. It didn't fit. And then they tried to fix it with essentials and this other stuff, and none of it worked, and in the end they just gave up, and then they started again. But it was I think it was 5 years, right? So it was quite a lot, 4 or 5 years before they finally threw in the cap and said, that's it. We've got to do something different, right? So it is possible, based on that negative example, that this time some of the people in charge might realize, nope, hang on, we are not going to make a money pit here. We're not just going to keep trying to make 5.5 a thing. We've screwed it up in a massive way. So we are going to try to go back to the drawing board and start a completely new edition. That is possible. That's something I could believe could be on the verge of happening, right? And maybe it's possible also that they want to bring in people who will try to appeal to certain groups and to create this sense of, either excitement or nostalgia about the game, right? And they can't bring in Gary Gygax because he has sadly long since passed away, but they could bring in Luke Gygax, right? And if that's the case, they're going to basically have him as a kind of a spokesman, right? To have someone with the Gygax name in the credits or something like that, which is probably not a terrible idea, except that everybody who actually knows about the context of both Wizards and of Luke Gygax would know what a kind of scam this would be, right? That on the one hand, Wizards of the Coast has had in the last few years, terrible disrespect for Gary Gygax, right? They basically smeared his name in horrible ways, including in the 50th anniversary book about the origins of D&D, where, they accused him of all kinds of ridiculous things, of things that a lot of which were not true for the matter. Other things were historically the case, but were not things that anyone needs to be condemned for, right? Gary Gygax did nothing that he needed to be condemned for. But from their point of view, oh no, he was terribly sexist and racist and homophobic and who knows what else, right? They crapped all over Gary Gygax in the past, right? Now, bringing in Luke Gygax could mean that they've realized that might be a bad tactic, right? It is possible. These things are starting to happen even at big corporate levels, where people are realizing that the false promise that was given to the corporations, that if you stop focusing on your straight white males and instead focus on strong black females, you're going to have 20 million black women playing D&D, right? At any time now, it's going to happen at any moment, right? And the peak experience of this was in the 5.5 books, right, where there was like literally 70% of all the characters were like black women, like that they had in the art and stuff like that. Vastly disproportional to anything even in our modern day reality, to say nothing of a medieval setting sort of thing. It was just ridiculous, and it did nothing because it never does anything. If you watch, I did in my RPG Pundit encounter with D&D Dad, we were talking about this, about like, how important is representation, and there's a clip. I then made a clip video of that part of the live stream that you can see in just a few videos down from this current one, where I explained, right, like I know that it means nothing because I live in a non-English speaking Latin American country, right, where there are gamers that come from, they're a Latino culture, and they do not want to play like Latino games. They want to play exactly what gamers everywhere want to play. They want to play D&D, dungeon crawls, right? Star Wars, Vampire the Masquerade is still kind of popular here, Call of Cthulhu, right? All the same games, and like even the native industries as it is in Latin America, right? You have in the only real Latin American country that produces a lot of its own games is Brazil, partly because they speak Portuguese and not Spanish, and so they have their own like cottage industry, and they're an enormous country, right? And like the two most popular games that ever came out of Brazil, one of them is very standard kind of generic fantasy, and the other one is one where you're playing like dudes that have giant robots fighting Godzilla-like monsters in Tokyo, right? So like, like kind of anime stuff, right? So like, it's the same everywhere in the world, right? It's your demographic is not a racial demographic. It's not a gender demographic. It's a nerd demographic, right? It's people who like that kind of stuff, right? It's like nerdy things. And you're never going to convince people who aren't part of that demographic to like enjoy playing RPGs, because that's not what RPGs are made for. Right, and maybe they're starting to figure that out in the same way that nowadays there's finally like shows on TV that are no longer full of woke nonsense, and it seems that everybody's kind of like trying to they're not, none of them are like denouncing wokeness or something like that, obviously, because then they have to account for why for the last 10 years they've been pulling this nonsense. But they're just like quietly slipping away from it, right? Like they're somebody, I forget which commentator it was that said, is that like, there's been like a 70% reduction in gay characters over the last 2 years or something like that, in TV shows. So, that's kind of a possibility that could be happening, that the game is going to not, it's not going to become like super based though, right? Like it's not, because the people that run these things, not just, obviously the current writers of D&D, who are all like either vegan cookbook writers or feminist bloggers, they are true believers, right? And those people will probably have to go, right? If they're going to make an edition that is going to be even mildly good, right? They're going to have to bring in people who actually know what they're doing, and people who aren't there just to be like political agents. But even in the corporate level, the corporate executives, right, who are, they're not that. They're mostly like these champagne socialists, right? They're these people that want to be in the progressively trendy, but they also want to make a lot of money for themselves, right? Things like that. They're still going to always be inclined to do what is fashionable on the left, right? Not on the right. So you're not going to get some kind of super based game, and you're definitely not going to get AD&D rules coming back. Like they might do another special edition reprint, right? You might remember that in 2014, when 5th edition came out, right around the same time, they did a reissuing of these deluxe versions of the AD&D rules. I was given those as a gift at the end of my work as a consultant there, and it's a very nice reprint, right? But that's all it is a reprint. And if you're doing just a reprint of AD&D, you obviously don't need Luke Gygax for anything, right? And they're definitely not going to go back to those rules and make a remake of those rules. Now, could the new game be something that will have more of an old school flavor? Maybe. We still don't even know that there is a new game, right? Because all of this is just rumors. But I can also tell you that if the goal was to make a really based game, Luke Gygax is not the guy to go for, right? Like, Luke Gygax has not been a champion of of conservative values or something like that, right? On the contrary, he has catered as much as he can possibly manage to the kind of woke end of the spectrum within the OSR, right? And he kind of gets away with it because of his last name, but he's not, he's a guy. I could definitely imagine him taking WotC's money, right, and making use of his last name. But he's not like Christopher Tolkien or something, who will be a staunch defender of everything that his father made, right? Like that is not Luke Gygax, he's going to go along with anything that they say, right? And so it's just, for him, it's just an opportunity to get his name in print and make some money, I think, that's going to be the kind of limit of his contribution, because he's also not really a game designer himself. I'm sure he probably knows more about games than almost anyone currently working for Wizards of the Coast. Don't get me wrong, right? But he hasn't made any, award-winning games of his own or something like that. He hasn't made any bestsellers or anything, He has run GaryCon, I believe. I'm pretty sure he's the one in charge of that. And he's tried to honor to a certain degree his dad's legacy, but he's also never stood up when people in positions of either corporate authority, like what happened with this D&D history book. He never stood up to fight back against the smearing of his dad's name there. And I don't think he's ever done that really with any of the even outside people without that authority, these woke YouTubers and woke bloggers who have constantly attacked Gary Gygax. That wasn't him. To some degree, it was, Ernie Gygax did more of that. Though Ernie Gygax also had his problems, right? But he too is now sadly passed away. So, like the notion that we're going to get like AD&D rules as written back as like the main edition, no, that's not going to happen, right? There could, like I said, they could do a special reissuing, but I'm doubtful even about that, right? Like, because they already have those books, they're already something you can buy, right? So, I think more likely, it's possible that there will be some kind of special project that's going to come out. It might be 6th edition. It might be something else. If they're smart, like honestly, the best thing they could do is immediately bring 5.5 to an end and start working on a new edition. But of course, they'd have to get the right people to do it. Because if they get the wrong people, it's going to be the same disaster all over again, right? If it's another book full of bad mechanics and ridiculous art and woke propaganda, that's not going to fix anything. That's going to just be another big mess for them, another big loss, right? It's the same money pit essentially. So essentially, we're going to have to wait and see right now. But anybody who's like dreaming of somehow restoring AD&D first edition supremacy, that isn't happening, guys. I'm sorry. It just isn't, So I guess that's everything I wanted to say about this. Check out all my products. Check out the Last Vikings. The Last Vikings is making its way towards gold bestseller status. So if you're planning on buying it, please check it out. And also, especially, check out the Red Room store. The Red Room store is closing, for those of you who haven't heard this yet, mainly because Portuguese income tax law or something like that, from what I understand it, has made it just impossible for it to be really suitably profitable for the Red Room people. They're going to continue to sell their products, I believe, on Lulu, but the Pundit files, which were hosted at the Red Room store, those are going to go away pretty soon. There's 40 issues there right now. We might put out a 41st before the Red Room closes. We might not. I don't know. That's up to Mad Hermit Press. And if you want to get any of those, look at those 40 titles. Right, the links to the Pundit files is in the description as well, at least to the last 2 issues. And from there, you can just click to the Pundit files category, and you can see all 40 of them. And if there's any of those that you want to get, you need to get them before the end of December, because after that, I cannot say when they will be back. I can definitely say they will not be coming back immediately, right? So eventually we will be trying to put them back up. I hope that's the plan on drive-through. But if there's anyone that you ever thought, I should get that, and you haven't yet, this is like your last chance, pretty much, right, for at least a while. So be sure to check that out, too. And, all right, that's everything for today. Currently smoking. This is an Italian Red Bark plus Argento Latacchia. We just finished it.